Huh?
You step away from camp for half a
Hello?
day.
Where
When
did
you
they
return,
go?
everyone is gone. No road points after them. No signpost names the valley. No phone tells you that your family moved 6 kilometers east before sunset. So how do you find them? For most of human history, being separated did not mean becoming lost. It meant reading a landscape that had already been turned into memory. The world had no paved roads, but it was not empty. It was crowded with routes, landmarks, smells, sounds, seasonal habits, and stories that told you where other people were likely to be. What kind of map survives without paper? Your first map was the ground beneath your feet. Repeated movement leaves structure. Grass bends, soil compacts, branches break at familiar heights, mud records toes, heels, loads, slips, and changes of pace. A trail does not need stone paving to become a road. How does that happen? It only needs many feet making the same decision. At White Sands in New Mexico, ancient mud preserved decisions like these in extraordinary detail. Matthew Bennett, David Bustos, and their colleagues documented a human trackway stretching roughly 1.5 kilometers across the former shore of an Ice Age lake. The prints appear to record one person making an outward and return journey, sometimes carrying a small child and sometimes setting the child down. That trackway does not tell you the traveler's destination with certainty. It does show purposeful movement across a known landscape. The person was not wandering randomly. The outward and return paths formed a journey between places that mattered. What would make those places findable? Water would come first. Springs, river bends, lake margins, and reliable pools pull humans, animals, and plants toward the same points. A group could scatter to forage and still know that everyone had to return to water. In a dry season, a water source could function like an address. The route toward it might follow a ridge, an animal trail, or the edge of a marsh. The safest path might avoid loose rock, thick brush, or a predator's den. Each journey would make the route easier to remember. How would you teach a road that nobody could see? Each retelling would make it easier to teach. You would not memorize the landscape as a list of coordinates. You would memorize a sequence. Walk toward the split hill. Keep the morning sun on your left. Cross the shallow stream where the dark trees begin. Turn when the ground changes from red to pale. Follow the cliff until the lone boulder looks like a crouching animal. Is that not already a map? That sequence is a map. Modern navigation researchers call this route knowledge. It means remembering connected landmarks in order rather than seeing the whole region from above. With enough experience, those routes can grow into a wider mental map. Then you can take shortcuts, predict where a valley opens, or choose another path when fire, flood, or animals block the familiar one. But knowledge inside one person's head is fragile. What happens when that person dies? The route has to become culture. Children walking with adults would learn which tree marked a turn and which dry riverbed became dangerous after rain. A place name could compress an entire warning into a few sounds. A story could preserve the order of landmarks. Could a song carry a route farther than one memory? A song could preserve the rhythm of a journey. Ray Norris and Wardaman Elder Bill Yidamjuma Harney described Australian Aboriginal songlines as oral maps. Songs connect named places, landscape features, ancestral narratives, and sometimes patterns in the sky. Singing the sequence helps keep the route in the correct order. This is not direct proof that every prehistoric group used songlines. No song fossilizes. Can shared knowledge become infrastructure? It can. A road can exist as shared knowledge long before it exists as built infrastructure. The same principle appears in the Arctic. Anthropologist Claudio Aporta studied Inuit wayfinding across snow, sea ice, and tundra, landscapes that can look almost featureless to an outsider. Skilled travelers use familiar horizons, wind-shaped snow, ice conditions, place names, animal behavior, and remembered routes. The landscape is not blank to them. What looks empty to an outsider may be crowded with direction. So what is the traveler actually seeing? Information. Modern Inuit knowledge is not a frozen copy of Paleolithic life. Neither are Aboriginal traditions or the practices of any living foraging community. Living cultures have their own histories, but they reveal what human navigation can do without a printed map, a compass, or a road sign. Your ancestors did not need the world to be marked for everyone. What mattered instead? The world needed to be meaningful to the people who shared it. That shared meaning became even more important when groups moved. Hunter-gatherer camps were rarely permanent cities. Resources changed with seasons, herds migrated, fruit ripened, rivers shrank, firewood disappeared near camp. Why would anyone leave a familiar camp? Conflict, illness, weather, or a large animal kill could trigger movement. So a returning hunter might genuinely discover an abandoned camp. The ashes would still matter. Warm coals could reveal how recently the group left. Footprints could show direction. Drag marks, discarded plant fibers, or broken stems might suggest who carried what. Could those traces reveal intention? The missing shelters and cleaned hearth area could distinguish an organized move from a sudden escape. Yet tracking alone would not solve everything. Rain could erase prints, wind could cover them, hard ground could leave almost nothing. What remains when the ground stops talking? Prediction would do the rest. You would know where food was becoming available. You would know which relatives preferred the eastern shelter in cold weather. You would know where the group usually met after a long hunt. You would know that a successful kill might pull the camp toward the carcass rather than the carcass toward camp. So what skill closes the gap? Finding people was partly navigation and partly social intelligence. Corin Apicella, Frank Marlowe, James Fowler, and Nicholas Christakis studied social networks among Hadza foragers in Tanzania. Their 2012 research included 205 adults in 17 camps. Hadza camps changed composition, and people named others with whom they hoped to live after a camp ended. The study cannot tell you exactly how Ice Age people organized themselves. It does show that mobile communities can maintain large social networks even while camp membership changes. People do not merely remember places. What else must you remember besides terrain? You must remember who tends to go where, with whom, and under what conditions. Your mental map would therefore contain people as well as hills. A particular waterhole might mean an ant's family. A rock shelter might mean winter gatherings. A distant grove might mean honey season. A river crossing might be where two bands exchange news, tools, partners, and food. Can archaeology show a social route? Sometimes it catches the material side of those connections. At Allergesly in Kenya, Alison Brooks and her colleagues reported stone tools made from obsidian around 320,000 years ago. Much of that volcanic glass came from sources tens of kilometers away. The same deposits also contained pigments and smaller, more carefully prepared tools than those common in earlier layers. An obsidian flake cannot tell you whether its maker personally walked to the source, received it through exchange, or obtained it through several linked groups. That uncertainty matters, but every possibility requires geographic knowledge and contact across distance. What travels with the stone? Information does. Someone knew where the source was. Someone knew a route or knew a person who did. Someone expected contact to happen again. Otherwise, exchange would collapse into a single lucky encounter. How could two mobile groups arrange that encounter? Not with an exact clock time. They could coordinate through recurring events. Meet when a certain fruit ripens, return when the river falls, gather when herds pass through the valley. Wait near the stone source after the first major rains. Travel when a star appears in a familiar seasonal position. What supplied both the calendar and the destination? Nature did. This made ancient time less abstract than modern time. A meeting was not simply scheduled for a numbered day. It was attached to a visible change in the world. Could the landscape announce that people were nearby? Sometimes it could. Smoke rising above trees could reveal an occupied camp, though archaeology rarely preserves proof of who intended smoke as a signal. At night, firelight could be visible from a ridge. Voices, tool strikes, dogs in later periods, and the smell of cooking could carry farther than the camp itself. These were not reliable over every distance. Wind changes, hills block sound, smoke can mean wildfire. When does a weak clue become useful? When it confirms an expectation. You already believe your group is near the river bend. Then you see a thin column of smoke above that part of the valley. The signal does not create the map. It confirms it. What about tracks? They work the same way. A footprint alone says that someone passed. A footprint recognized inside a shared territory can say much more. Its size, depth, direction, and freshness may suggest a child, an adult carrying weight, a hurried traveler, or a familiar companion. Specialist trackers can extract astonishing detail from small disturbances. Projects in European Ice Age caves have even brought Johonsy sand trackers together with archaeologists to examine ancient human footprints. How much can trained attention recover from a disturbed patch of earth? Their interpretations show that it can recover a great deal, although conclusions about a specific prehistoric person still require caution. The critical technology was not a single trick, it was redundancy. If the trail vanished, you still had the ridge. If clouds hid the stars, you still had wind, slope, and water flow. If a camp moved unexpectedly, you still knew seasonal gathering places. If one person forgot a route, a story, name, or song could preserve it in others. Why did the system survive? Because knowledge was distributed across people, senses, and generations. That creates the counterintuitive answer. Ancient humans did not find each other despite having no roads. They found each other because the entire landscape functioned as a road system. A modern road tells you where to move even when you know nothing about the land. An ancient route demanded the opposite. How can a road remain invisible and still work? You have to know the land so well that the route needs almost no physical marking. Today, a dead battery can turn a familiar city into a puzzle. A missed message can make another person feel unreachable. Navigation has become easier, but much of it has also moved outside your memory. Your ancestors carried the network inside them. They carried the shape of ridges, the order of waterholes, the timing of seasons, the habits of relatives, and the stories attached to every turn. Finding another person was never only a problem of distance. What problem were your ancestors really solving? A problem of shared knowledge. You step away from camp for half a day. When you return, everyone is gone. But the road is still there. You have simply learned how to see it.